Okay, welcome everyone to the August collective transmission. Um, I'm excited for this. We're switching things up a little bit this time. So instead of divining on a theme for the month, I've actually sourced questions from the community, and we are going to be answering those tonight, which I'm really excited about because there's a pretty broad range of questions. And the whole point of these monthly collective transmissions are really to speak to a larger community, humanity level healing. And that's actually a piece that kind of came out in this month's transmission. So I'm really excited to touch upon that. But for anyone here that's joining us who has not worked with this medicine, does not know what it is, I always like to begin with a little introduction, just speaking to that and honoring the teachers and elders who carry this lineage and who have really given their permission and blessing for me to hold this medicine in the West. So I am initiated in a West African shamanic lineage that does not have a name. We call it wild medicine, but it is rooted in the Dagara people of Burkina Faso, West Africa. And when I encountered this lineage, I was working in Northern California. It was at a very pivotal time in my life. And I was literally kind of pilgrimaging around, following the call of the wild. And lo and behold, the wild found me. And since I started working with this medicine, it has truly transformed my life in so many ways. It is one of the most embodied earth medicines that I've come across. And I could talk about how much I love it all day, but I won't. If you're curious, I always invite people to come sit with me. I think that is the best way to experience divination. But needless to say, divination is a medium, it is a modality that allows us to communicate with other forms of consciousness. And the forms of consciousness that I am in particular close relationship with is the elemental world. So the consciousness of the mountain, the waters, the earth, right? Everything that's around us in nature has intelligence, as well as the consciousness of the ancestral world and the spirit realms. So obviously there's a lot of different beings, deities, energies floating around in there. But for simplicity and sake, most of the beings that I work with in the spirit realm are ancestral, benevolent, and occasionally, a god or goddess will come through, which is always really fun. But that is really I would say the extent of the intelligences that I interact with on the other side. So divination is a very powerful modality through which to find answers, insights, messages that concern your deepest questions that you can't seem to find an answer or solution to. When that happens, I usually describe it as someone is looking for the answer to a spiritual question, and those don't always exist in the same realms, and they're not solved by the same methods and strategies that we're so used to employing in our everyday life. So with all of that said, today I did some divination around questions that were posed by the community. And I love these because these monthly sessions are really about how do we help humanity? How do we do better together? So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right in. I will not remember who asked what questions, and that's totally fine. But the first question I want to cover is, why is it important to see beauty in everything? And I mean, I love every question that was asked today. I think that all of them are really deep and powerful. But this is a really interesting one for me because I am someone that tends to struggle with being focused on the problem, right? We live in a culture where there's so much emphasis on how do we solve this problem? How do we get through this challenge, right? And one of my favorite phrases is that a negative frame is still a frame. So anything that we are focusing on a lack of, right, a detriment, a challenge, a problem, we are actually emphasizing the problem. And sometimes that's important if we're looking for solutions, but more often than not, it just starts to make the problem feel really unwieldy and big and unsolvable. So I've been doing a lot of inner healing and work around the areas where I tend to look at things and get fixated on the negative versus what here is working, what here is positively impacting or contributing to the greater whole of something? And this question, I think, kind of gets to the heart of that. And what the being said is that beauty honors the unique puzzle pieces that make up life. And I love that analogy, right? Because if you're thinking about, there's so many different people and beings and things on this planet that are alive. It's kind of this cacophony of life. And they were really showing me these pieces of a puzzle, right? Like if you're doing a huge jigsaw puzzle, and so many of the pieces look similar, right? They have similar colors, kind of similar shapes, but with slight variations. But each one is essential, and each one is necessary to complete this whole picture. And the beings also love to talk a lot about the collective body of humanity as exactly that, an organism. And when we think about ourselves in that manner, we cease to become such individualized pieces. Like obviously we still have our edges, our boundaries, our outlines, but I then see myself as more of a cell in this greater organism versus, me against the world, or me as this like independent, individualistic entity. I think when we frame life like that, as ourselves, us being part of this larger organism, it's easier to feel more responsible for the whole versus just ourselves. And that's something that I really felt in this analogy of the puzzle pieces, right? Each piece, each person is unique and essential, regardless of how many others might look somewhat similar or do the same thing, right? Even if it looks similar on the surface, there are tiny, tiny things that are always different, that are always its own thing. And so to come back to this question of like, why is it important to acknowledge the beauty in everything? Because to acknowledge the authentic beauty in something, even if you find it like ugly or terrifying, right? Like there's things that are hard to look at. But to acknowledge that even in the things that are uncomfortable or that you perceive as ugly or that frighten you on some level or that just are not your taste, to still acknowledge the beauty that lives within it allows you to honor and recognize this piece's place in the greater whole. And we all have one, right? It's all here. Everything has medicine inside of it. Even the things that we can't relate to or understand or appreciate. But your ability to appreciate widens the aperture of your vision so that you can actually see more deeply into things. And you can essentially have more ability to really work with it. Now, think about some examples in your life where something really hard has happened. For me, I've been in a very big grief portal for the past couple weeks. And it has been extremely difficult. It's not been easy. There's times when it's like, man, I really wish I could just go about my life instead of having to stop and cry and grieve and feel this difficult, hard emotion. But the role of grief in my life has been a profound catalyst for so much. For one, it's really helped me appreciate love through the contrast of its loss. And so if I were not as able to be present in the grief and to appreciate the very deep, deep nuance and beauty of grief, I could not as fully appreciate and experience the depth of love. And so in the same way, right? Like we talk about pain being a teacher, and the only way we can really recognize pain as a teacher is when we can acknowledge a very the word extreme is what comes to mind, but that's not the right word, but a unique form of beauty, right? because there's a lesson here for us. There's maybe a boundary, something that wants to be shown to us that is important to look at. So we can actually appreciate and admire the authentic beauty of almost everything. It simply takes our willingness to look past certain things that we might define as beautiful and easy to appreciate. Like, it's easy to appreciate a great piece of art. It's probably less easy to appreciate a painful lesson that you've had to learn. But when you do that, you unlock what I personally think of as like God level, right? You can work with anything that is given to you. It might not be fun, it might not be pleasing, it might not be easy, but you are in resistance to nothing, which is truly a supreme level of consciousness. So what they said is that everything is beautiful when it's fulfilling its unique niche and role in life. And if you are willing to really look deeply and see what that is, you can actually more fully appreciate everything life has to give you. So thank you for that question. I'm really appreciating that teaching. Now, what is something that every person can do right now to create more freedom for everyone? I think this is so relevant given that America's in an election cycle. And as we all are very aware, there's been some very heightened and extreme opinions and points of view in our political landscape. And not just right now, it's just been growing increasingly fraught over the past while, we'll say. So the answer is really quite understandable. What they're saying is it's important to balance out extremes in your tendencies, in your thinking, in your actions. How can you look for the middle ground in all situations? Now, I'm someone that spent the good part of my I would say all of my 20s, seeking out extremes because I needed that contrast to really appreciate certain things. And contrast does illuminate in a very powerful way. However, extremes amplify and distort truth. You will rarely find the whole truth in either extreme, in either, in the opposing poles. Now, a difficult thing for a lot of people is to acknowledge the fact that the real truth includes everything in some way, shape, or form. And if your version of democracy, your version of healing, your version of love does not include that which you cannot understand, appreciate, or relate to, it's not enough. And that's truly something I see a lot of people struggling with right now. I struggle with it, right? There are certain things I can't quite fully wrap my mind around as like inclusive or something I want to include in my version of reality. But that's one of the great tests and lessons and challenges of being alive, is the fact that we will never be a, like mono society. We will never all fit into the same mold. And so given this, knowing that we will never all feel the same way, think the same way, the true like test of society is how do we make this work for all of us? It will require compromise. It will require some middle ground. And so I think this is a really powerful teaching, and also one that is really quite simple, right? More freedom for everyone means acknowledging that even if you don't need that freedom for yourself, that someone else does. And therefore, your freedom must include that freedom for them. So if you don't have a womb and you're like, abortion isn't relevant for me, well, it's relevant for 50% of this country. So we need to be able to see past our own biases and our own limited experience so that we can factor in freedoms that do account for other people who don't have the same privileges, who don't have the same experience, who don't have the same body. And I think to expect otherwise is honestly an immature, naive perspective. So if your version of truth, if your extreme perspective or viewpoint eliminates, diminishes, suppresses someone else's existence or truth, it isn't reflective of the full reality. It does not go far enough. It is not inclusive enough, and is therefore a distortion of truth. Your truth, taken to an extreme, will never reflect the full truth. And so I think it's really important that we actually practice. How do we find that middle ground? What does it look like? We can practice this on so many levels too, right? I am someone that loves to be right. It's like a really unfortunate part of my character is like, I love to be right. And I'm not always going to be right. That's not actually what's important. So me being willing to not be right might actually serve my own interests at some point, right? So we have to remember this, and we have to practice this. True partisanship, true democracy, true truth accounts for what includes and serves the greatest whole, the most people. And anything less than that is a denial of someone's existence, someone's reality, someone's freedom. So it's important to remember that that is the opposite of freedom. And we need to find ways to work with that. And I can imagine like this is going to irk some people. This is going to trigger some people. And you know what? Good. I think we need to look at our own extremes more honestly and become more humble, because truly creating freedom for everyone requires us to think beyond ourselves, beyond our kin, beyond our tribe, beyond our biases. Yeah, it really requires us to extend that sense of community to all of humanity. And I think that would serve us greatly right now. So, what can you do now to create more freedom for everyone? Be mindful of where you fall into extremes of thought, opinion, or action, and do your best to find a middle ground that accounts for more. Okay, next question. What does it mean to heal? Are we here to heal ourselves, the collective, or both? The answer with this is so simple, it really struck me. To heal is to be in relationship with ourselves, one another, and the earth. These are basic requirements for what we know as health. And it's really interesting when you, like, it feels so in your face and obvious when you really sit with that. But they really emphasize it's all of those things. It's not just being in touch with yourself and knowing what your body needs or wants. You must also be in touch with, who am I in relationship? How do those energies feed and support and nourish me, as well as the earth? There's a lot of what I would call unrootedness in our culture in America at this time, a lot of disassociation, even like conversations around ascension, I find to be so personally triggering and alienating, because I'm like, that's a disassociation. Where are you going? True healing is being in your body. True healing is learning how to be in your body. when we try and escape from that, we're actually escaping one of the greatest tools we have for healing, for evolution. I personally prefer the word evolution over any kind of ascendance. So if we are not connected, if we are not participating in a greater ecosystem of connection, communion, relationship, we are not healing. And this really makes sense, right? Because we often say in different healing circles or ceremonies or what have you, that healing doesn't happen within a vacuum. And truly it does not. So this is a really great kind of like checkpoint. What is your level of participation in these three areas? How deeply are you in relationship with yourself, honestly? Are there areas of relationship where you feel out of alignment with yourself? I know there's definitely some for me, right? Like I'm not doing a ton of physical activity right now. That's an area where I'm not in good relationship with my physical body. So I invite you to check in with each one of those. What does it really mean to be in relationship with yourself as a body, as a human, as a spirit? What does it mean to be in relationship with other people, with your family, with your friends, with your larger community, with your AA group, right? With your religious fellowship? Where are you in that? Is there other places where you could show up more fully, where you could participate more actively, more proactively, more consistently? Are you really participating? Right? I think there is times where it's like we show up, we just go to church, we clock in, we're like, bye. Are you really there? Are you really serving? Or are you just extracting? And then finally, the earth. There's so many ways that we are not in connection with our land, our place, our rootedness, our sense of belonging, our sense of responsibility. It is not so simple as saying like, oh yeah, I went outside and touched the ground. Great, like hug a tree all you want, but go deeper. How are you actually taking responsibility for tending to the earth, to the larger good and health of this planet? We don't all need to like put on our climate change fighting outfits. That's not everyone's role. But I think it's really important to interrogate, what do you do to make a difference, to reduce your impact and footprint, to increase your impact in meaningful ways, right? Are you carpooling? Are you recycling? Are you composting? Do you go out and ground yourself? Do you talk to trees? Do you acknowledge nature as a viable place of relationship for you? Um, there's this concept in, I don't remember if I think it's exists in several different religions and cultures, but the term is Indra's net. And the idea is like this infinite net where there's all of these nodes, all of these like almost diamond facets, and each facet reflects the infinite faces of every other facet. And it's kind of a thought experiment, right? It kind of breaks your mind to think about. But I love it because when I think about being in connection, that's what I think of, is this web that extends forever that I'm woven into, that I am an essential part of. And I reflect, right, all these other parts of it. And when I think about that, I actually think about like nutrient exchange in the same way that tree roots will communicate and exchange nutrients with other trees in the area, facilitated by mycelium, right? So when we are in relationship, we are actually actively receiving energy, nutrients, information from those we are in connection with. And that information, those nutrients, not only extend our life force, they can save our life. And when energy doesn't move between those places, it actually creates stagnancy, creates stuckness. And we know that when energy can't move, when it gets stuck and stagnant, it creates disease, dis-ease, because energy is always wanting to move and flow. And that's what they were saying. They were kind of doing a little wordplay. They're like, when we are divided from these areas of life-giving nutrients, it creates disease. It creates discordance in the bigger system, not just in your physical body, right? That's one system within many bigger, overlapping, nested systems. And to only see your body as the arbitrator of true health or healing is to miss the larger picture. So, if we are truly in relationship with ourselves, with our people, with one another, with the earth, then all of our healing serves the collective. It is impossible to separate themselves from each other, which I think is so beautiful. And it really, to me, thinking about that infinite web of connection really illuminates the idea behind healing in general. It is impossible for healing to remain isolated. It will always ripple out. It will always influence the larger systems that we are inextricably connected to. The final thing that they left me with was division leads to disease in all areas at every level. So keep that in mind. Where you are divided against yourself, you are creating the conditions for disease to take root. Where you are divided from someone else, right, in a way that cuts you off from essential nutrients or connection, you are creating the opportunity for disease and discord to come in. Where you are divided from the earth, you are creating a distance from one of the most life-giving essences, right? It's even silly to call it an essence. Earth is life. Why would you distance yourself from that? Okay. This leads me to my next question. I love this one. How do we align with nature's intended purpose? And this kind of builds on what we were saying before. Here's the short answer, and then I'm going to give you the long answer. Learn how to use energy as medicine. Now, let's go deeper. Look all around you. One of the things I love about nature is that there's patterns everywhere in nature. Patterns of life, patterns of survival. The mechanics of how life works is all evident in nature. There's a whole field of study called biomimicry that looks at how do we create technologies and machines and better, more efficient processes based on what we see in nature. And when I talk about patterns, I'll give you an example. There are repeating patterns everywhere in nature. Lightning, for instance, is repeated in the veins of our body, which is also seen in how trees will sometimes grow, right? Or the veins on a leaf. These are all similar structures. They are all related patterns. And these patterns are replicated because they work. Because nature has evolved over billions of years to find the most efficient, resourceful path. I'm sorry, but it's total hubris to think that we have invented anything better in the blink of an eye that we have been alive as humans. So when you look at nature's patterns, you realize very quickly nothing is wasted. I will say that again, nothing is wasted. All garbage, all rot, right? The leaves fall from the trees, they get composted into the earth. They come back as new life in the spring. Okay? All garbage, death, rot is returned to the earth and reborn as food, energy, life, aliveness. If you look around at what's happened in the time that humans have been here, you will see that we have not improved on that situation. We have worsened it. We have garbage dumps. There's plastic everywhere in our bodies, in our oceans, in our testicles. We have not learned from nature. And that is not a great thing, y'all. So, to learn how to do this, to learn how to use energy as medicine without creating more waste, means we are truly working with the foundational principles of energy and nature. And if you don't already get it, like everything we have is born from nature. So we have not reached the apex of our evolution as far as I'm concerned. We might have all the fancy toys and technologies, but we cannot figure out what to do with our garbage. We cannot figure out how to exist on this planet without polluting the fuck out of it. We are not as advanced as we think we are. I laugh when I hear Elon Musk talk about going to space, because what are you going to do there, bro? Live in your litter box? You can't even exist in this planet in a closed loop ecosystem without messing it up. And your solution is to just escape that? Good luck. It's such fallacy. It's such hubris. So until we can recycle, reuse, and return all waste back into bioenergy, we will suffer in our shit. And you know what? We deserve it. I know it's a harsh truth, but here's the thing. All information is available to you. Nature is the most lenient, resourceful teacher. And your birthright as a human is the ability to read the fine print in everything. Most of us don't realize we can because, one, we were conditioned out of it or socialized out of it. Two, we were never taught it in the first place. Three, this is a loss. This is a huge loss. And our survival depends upon it. So nature is the teacher, period. Nature is the guru, period. Like nothing, no Buddha, no ascended master is better than nature. And if you still believe that, you are ignoring the immense genius that exists all around you, that is here to evolve and advance you, that is the most life-giving essence available. So, until we have listened to nature and utilized these gifts, until we can truly use energy as medicine and all forms of energy. I just want to remind that it's not just like doing mushrooms or plant medicine. It is all forms of energy are medicine, period. Learn how to use that for yourself. And until you do, you have not learned about the true purpose of life. So, as someone who is very interested in getting the most out of life, right? We have a limited amount of time here. What are you going to do with it? I would highly, highly emphasize learning more about energetic practices, learning how to alchemize your shit into energy and medicine, learning how to really do that in the external world as well. It's a little bit more advanced, but we need to get there. Thank you for this question. That question really hit home for me. Okay. What needs to shift to help Americans feel more at home here on Earth? This medicine was sent in by a fellow diviner in my clan. Thank you, Marie. And it really hits because, as we talked about, right, there's a lot of American culture is deeply unrooted. We lack lineage, we lack connection to our ancestors, we lack connection to place, to land, in the ways that our ancestors and indigenous forefathers and mothers used to have. Everyone at some point in time was indigenous to planet Earth. If you no longer have that connection, it's because you have been colonized. So this feels really important right now because America is such a superpower that is really has lost complete sight of how do we be a participatory member of planet Earth without messing it up. Now, all right, this one went a really interesting direction and I appreciated that. So the message was, remember that you incarnated with soul contracts that naturally bind you to people whose existence makes yours possible. The whole premise of America's individualistic mentality is a falsehood. No one does anything alone, as we just talked about. Healing doesn't happen in a vacuum. But more importantly than that, this was news to me. I really like this. As souls who incarnate onto this plane and this planet, we all take on karmic contracts. And those karmic contracts are designed to make it so that you can't do this alone. What that means is that everyone has areas. Okay, let me start over. Everyone has soul contracts, number one. The fundamental nature and purpose of our soul contracts balance our karmic impact. Okay? Now, this means that you will have areas of your evolution and soul development that are purposefully designed as weaknesses in order for you to learn invaluable lessons and to receive help. It is part of your soul contract to receive help in certain areas, as much as it is part of your soul contract to give help in other areas. You do not get to escape either. Now, everyone has these requirements. They just look very different. Some people are going to have weaknesses in certain areas, strengths in others that someone else doesn't have. Great. There is a larger scale being balanced here. We all require one another. Now, remembering this is an essential area of humility, right? No one is perfect. No one is better than one another. We're all balancing these cosmic scales. But generally speaking, here's how to work with it. If you have an excess of something, you are supposed to give more of it away. Do you have a ton of physical strength in one area? Are you super freaking gifted? Then how do you give that away? If you don't have a job where you're giving that, are you showing up to help elderly people in your neighborhood around the house? Are you helping your partner with the hard physical labor jobs? Are you planting trees? I don't know, right? How do you use the excess that you have been given? This always astonishes me when people have billions of dollars and they're like, nah, I think I'll just take more for myself. It's like, brother, you are in a serious karmic debt right now. So if you are someone who has more money, practice giving more of it away. If you are someone that has amazing, speaking talents, right? You're a very persuasive speaker. How can you use that on behalf of someone who does not? If you have more resources in one area, practice giving them away. If you have more skills in one area, practice using them in service of someone else who does not. Okay? Why else are you given extra? Because it is designed to be an exchange, not a hoarding. This is always how nature balances itself. If you look around, one of my favorite analogies is that trees will do this. They will literally give other trees nutrients, right? And information so that they all thrive. because they are an invaluable part of this ecosystem. The last thing I want to say about this is something my teacher always emphasizes. My teacher has been, lived in Africa, been in Africa, initiated in Africa. So he has a lot of experience in the motherland. And he talks about the concept of abundance because he's like, here in the West, our concept of abundance is so beyond anything that I've seen in Africa. It does not exist in Africa. And the reason being that in a village, that sense of responsibility for the whole is a lot more present, especially when you don't have as many material goods and resources in the same way that we do in America. In America, we all live like fucking gods. You have to understand that. The level of like materialism is so far beyond what most cultures would ever call normal. And especially in an indigenous village in Africa. So, he talks a lot about, he shares a lot of stories of if someone comes into in excess of something, someone has 5 pots. They gift their extra pots to someone who does not have one. And like the idea of anyone having an inflated, excessive amount of something, like so much more than anyone else in the village, it would be seen as detrimental. And more than likely, it would be redistributed for them if they weren't doing it themselves. Because that is just so far outside the interests of community that it would be seen as a detriment to the whole. So I invite us most of us have, even if we are not Jeff Bezos, we have so much in our lives. We have so much to give, and we don't even acknowledge that. So this is something that, I think we are all learning how to really feel at home and belong. But this to me feels like something that is grossly out of balance in America. And I really invite us to look at the places where we have extra and gift it away. No strings attached. No, like, if you do this for me, then I'll give that for you. It's like, what if you just give it? This is actually, if you're at all interested in miracle technologies, this is a miracle technology. And you will start to experience a different flow of abundance in your life as a result. Okay. Okay. How do we foster greater connection with our spirits, ancestors, and guides? I love it. The first question was so easy. It was like, speak to them. Speak to them. Here's the thing, y'all, and this actually came up in a divination that I was doing today with a client. We often have this, like, because we can't see the physical presence, well, most of us can't see the physical presence of spirits or ancestors, we assume they're not there. Basic laws of physics dictate matter cannot be created or destroyed, it just changes form. The energy of your ancestors, of these spirits, exists. You just can't see it because that matter has shifted into something that is not visible to our specific eyes. So you must understand that your connection wants to be treated like any other form of connection in your life. In the same way that you would call your friends and tell them what's happening in your life, ask for their advice, listen to their advice. You can and should be doing this with your ancestors and spirit guides if you want to have a reciprocal relationship with them. It is a free will universe. They can't just come in and start like doing stuff on your behalf. They can do a little bit. They can try and get your attention, but until you invite them in fully, they can only do so much. They are bound by the laws of this universe. So our ancestors exist in an energetic dimension. And I want you to think about that. Like you have this connection with them, and then let's say someone passes over, that connection is still there. It's just shifted over here, but there's still a connection. So generally speaking, all spirits need to be fed. Okay. Many ancient cultures, indigenous people know this, and they feed their spirits diligently. One of my favorite things about visiting Bali was seeing that level of devotion to the tending of the spirits by the whole town, by the whole culture. It was really just like beautiful to witness. So your spirits want to be fed. Let's talk about what that means. As with anything, what we put in is what we get out. So if you want nourishing connections, you must nourish the connection. So a few ways to do that. Ancestral altars, right? Very, very simply put, a photo of your ancestor or ancestors. If you have more photos of people passed over, put them all on that altar. Leave a bowl of water, refresh that bowl of water. Maybe have some things there that remind you of them, that make for a palpable connection. Feed it. How do we feed it? We make offerings to it. We speak prayers to it. We share our hearts. We spend time with it. So show up at your altar. Talk to your ancestors out loud. Invite them in. Ask them for help. Give them little treats, right? Ancestors love this. They want that connection with you. It is literally what they get to do on the other side. Many of them, as my teacher likes to say, they transition. They're kind of like, oh my goodness, I was kind of a schmuck. Better make good on that. They want to help. You just need to ask. So, ancestral altars, right? Any kind of physical place where you can create a little place to put that energy, right? To give it a physical form, even if it's not a human body. Offerings, man, you can go a lot of places with this. Some spirits might tell you they want something particular if you listen deeply enough. Every now and then I'll get the feels like the grandfathers want M&Ms today. I'm just gonna do it. What do you have to lose, right? Speaking their names, keeping their essence alive. Finding ways to honor them. If you know that, your grandfather liked to have a little sip of mezcal at the end of every meal, offer him a little shot glass of mezcal, right? It's in these ways that we keep that relationship living. Cook their favorite meal. Bless their life as you sit with this food that continues your life. Speak prayers upon them. Ask for their advice. I want to say that prayers should always be said out loud. Okay? Spirits cannot hear your thoughts. That's an invasion of your free will. So sit with their altar. Share what's on your heart. Ask for help. Ask for wisdom. And then be willing to entertain the ways in which it comes through for you. It might show up as like an intuitive hit. Oh, I should apply for that job here. Why not? It might show up as an actual, right? Some people hear their ancestors. Some people get kind of like messages through other synchronicities, but be open to how it arrives. And the same goes for other spirits too, right? If you want to court a deity, and now listen, this kind of gets into, there's what my teacher would call level 1 spirits and level 3 spirits. Okay, there's different levels. Your ancestors, your spirit guides, those are level 1. You already have connections with them, right? Gods and goddesses, level 3. We're talking big power, big energy. Be really careful with that. They're going to want more. you also need to be mindful that, like, as someone who called Kali in one Halloween because I was like, that would make for a cool costume, beware. Okay. These are serious energies. Do not, in other words, fuck around and find out. Um, so just be mindful, but in the same way that you would, create a little altar for your ancestor, you can do the same for a god. I highly recommend, if you want to work with a specific deity, to do some research around what they want, what kinds of offerings are good for them, what not to give them, and kind of what to expect when working with them. Certain gods and goddesses, like thunder gods, lightning gods, they're very powerful and they can bring the storm. So that's why I say proceed with caution if you're trying to do that work. But it's really the same for all spirits. Tend the relationship, show up for it consistently, make offerings, speak your prayers and asks out loud. Never come with empty hands. If you want a favor from a spirit, come with an offering. Okay. I always tell people, like, you would never just show up at someone's house and be like, feed me. You'd at least bring a bottle of wine. So, in the same way, your spirits, your ancestors deserve the same respect. And the more you show up with respect and humility and true, like, devotion and an open heart, you will be amazed. You will really start to feel their presence in your life. Okay, we're nearing the end of this, y'all. So, our next question, how can we best contribute to the collective healing and the reawakening of the love template? Okay. So, first things first, and I love how clear and direct this is. Love and compassion must take up more space in our reality. Okay? What you invest in, what you emphasize, what you prioritize, amplifies. It's as simple as that. The universe is a powerful algorithm that mirrors back what you put into it. Now, that doesn't mean you should never feel anger or you should never have a bad thought. It's what are you giving the most space to, right? So we can't fake love. The universe knows the vibration of love. So if you're angry, be angry. But if you're using that anger to hurt people, to punish people, to judge people, you are giving that anger a lot of space and energy, and it's going to start returning to you that same energy, right? So, and this kind of, I don't want to get too lost in the weeds here because the point of feeling our emotions is to feel our emotions so we don't let that emotion sit and stagnate in our bodies. However, if you participate in judgment regularly, you will feel judged. If you give people the benefit of the doubt, you're going to experience the same thing, right? You're going to get more benefit of the doubt. If you choose loving compassion wherever possible, you increase the force that is love in all actions. And listen, y'all, it's so easy to get triggered these days. It's so easy to fly off the handle at small little things. Is that how you want to approach life? Is that the life you want to live? Is that the energy you want to experience? Because that is what you are choosing. Now, I've been playing around with this a lot lately. And I've been keeping a little list, and it's called Good Things Happen to Me All the Time. And I just notice when good things are happening to me. Sometimes it's like, wow, this person gave me such a beautiful compliment. Sometimes it's like, I had such a great sleep last night. It isn't the biggest things, but I've been noticing that as I pay attention, more of those good things start happening. Like someone gave me a compliment the other day that was like really moving and beautiful to receive. And I wrote that down. I was like, oh my goodness. It's like every day since then, someone has reached out to me with such a beautiful, unprompted, loving message. just blessing me up. And I'm talking like people from that I haven't talked to in like years. So it's an interesting game to play, right? Now, there's a couple other things here. One of the major teachings that my beings have given me is that we don't walk towards wholeness, right? We come from wholeness. So if you are trying to fix something in your life, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, right? We're emphasizing the problem, we're emphasizing the brokenness. But if you come at that situation with, how do we make this more whole? How do we bring this back into coherence? What if we assume the coherence is innate and we just need to kind of reharmonize things? You are going to find a way to do that. And it's going to reaffirm the original wholeness. So, how we do one thing is how we do everything. If we are always assuming that there's a problem that needs to be fixed, we're going to look around life and just see broken shit. Okay? If we are assuming that everyone is doing the best that they can, and maybe they're just having a bad day, we're going to receive a lot of grace because we're giving a lot of grace. So I bring that up because I think that's a really important thing here, is the reawakening of the love template is always within reach. It is always within us. And it is a choice. And believe you me, I've had days where it's like, you know what? I would rather be a judgmental twat right now. That just, I need to get that out of my system. But I don't want that to be the whole of my existence. So when I notice that I'm really starting to become more judgmental, I'm going to do my best to shift my focus to something that feels compassionate and loving. And as I do that, I find more self-compassion. Now, the words war vibration were kind of named in the reflection of this question. And I want to speak to something that didn't actually come through today, but has come through for me before, as I've sat with mushrooms. And it was a very, very potent teaching around, because I think a lot of people are like, well, how can I love a murderer? How can I love, an oil wreck in the Gulf? How can I love arms dealers, that are perpetuating violence? I get it. It's really hard to love that. However, what the mushrooms told me, I'll never forget it. It was one of the most profound experiences of my life. What they said was that we have the idea of power in our culture is completely wrong. It is so far from the truth of what actual power is. And they're talking about spiritual power. And what they showed me is all of the people that have incarnated on this planet to embody and express this ugliness, let's say, right? Hate, murder, evil, crime, death, poverty, all those beings who have incarnated with that as part of their life dharma have taken on one of the most supreme forms of healing. They have taken on one of the most enlightened, not to say they are enlightened in this incarnation or that they know it, but that is one of the most supreme sacrifices you could make for humanity. And these people deserve love. And what they are revealing in this incarnation is the extent of what we cannot love, of what we allow in our world as a result of turning away from love. And so this does not condone or justify cruel, evil, ugly behavior, but it's to separate the behavior from the person and to recognize that part of our great task is to still try and have compassion for those whose experience on this planet does not align with what we think is the highest form of love. That deserves even more love. And I say this knowing how difficult that is, knowing that it will test every last ounce of our self-compassion and our grace and our forgiveness. But is that not the point? So again, kind of coming back to this, like, beauty is in everything. Are we willing to find it? Are we willing to stretch our hearts so big that we can find what is lovable in the most unlovable act? Can we love the person who committed that act enough to help them find restorative justice, to help them find healing? Because if not, then y'all, we are supremely fucked. So what I want to leave you with is, let your actions be inspired by the energy of wholeness, which includes everything. It includes all the brokenness. So let your actions be inspired by that greater knowing of coherence and compassion, rather than what is broken or fearful in you. And you will start to really reawaken the love template. All right, y'all. That covers all of our questions for tonight. I want to thank everyone who sent in a question. There was some really profound ones, and we didn't get to cover them all. So I'm hoping to do this again, potentially next month as well. And just thank you for tuning in, for listening, and for sharing your energy in this space. It means the world. And I'm super grateful to be here, to be offering this. Okay, y'all. Ta-ta for now.